Deep in the South Pacific, first to see the dawn of a new day, Aotearoa, New Zealand.
New Zealand is a land of magnificent contrasts. There really is something for everyone. Snow-covered mountains, deep blue lakes offering every water sport imaginable, native forest with their unusual lush vegetation. Excitement, action, a chance to do something you never thought you would. The colourful, proud culture of the Maori.
This is New Zealand. Come and take a look. New Zealand has two major islands, conveniently known as the North and South Islands. For this journey through the country, let's start at the top.
With a subtropical climate and long stretches of sandy beaches, Cape Reinga is a real favourite with holidaymakers. Between Cape Reinga and Kaitaia is 90 Mile Beach, a long flat stretch of beach with towering sand dunes on one side and the Tasman Sea on the other. The Te Paki stream is carefully negotiated by tour vehicles every day. Let's face it, who can resist a slide down a sandhill? Mile Beach is in fact only 88 kilometers long, but seems longer to holidaymakers who take time out to travel along it by four-wheel drive or coach tours.
The kauri forests of Northland contain some of the largest native trees in New Zealand, which is understandable when you think these trees are over 1,000 years old. Kauri would be New Zealand's most prized native timber. Further down the coast is the Bay of Islands, where some of New Zealand's most significant political and economic activities took place. The Treaty of Waitangi, signed in 1840, created a contract between the Maori people and the British inhabitants and gave New Zealand its founding document. Even today, many aspects of New Zealand's law can be traced back to the intent of the treaty.
Russell was once a whaling town and is home to New Zealand's oldest church, which still bears the musket holes of those early rugged times. Russell became the country's first capital in 1840. Pompalia House, built in 1842, was the home of the first Catholic mission in New Zealand. Russell's come a long way, and today is a popular summer resort, combining old world charm with the fun and excitement of sun, sea and surf. It's a base for game fishing and a popular anchorage for pleasure craft.
Russell, Waitangi and Paihia are all Northland settlements from which to explore the Bay of Islands. Take your pick of boat tours or hire a boat or yacht yourself and explore the magnificent natural beaches and hideaways the islands possess. The easy atmosphere of the Bay of Islands is very relaxing, especially from the top deck, or even from a dinghy.
To get a bird's eye view, you could take to the air. Kiwis enjoy the great outdoors, and this patch of ocean with its array of unspoiled islands gives them and their visitors a taste of what the outdoors is all about. Inland from Waitangi and the Bay of Islands is Kerikeri, a flourishing fruit-growing district. This is also where New Zealand's oldest European buildings stand. A national landmark, the Stone House, was built in 1832, while next door, Kemp House was established by Samuel Marsden as a second mission station in 1821. There can't be many places which still have a steam engine passing through the middle of town. But at Kawakawa, this wee beauty is a regular.
On to Auckland and New Zealand's largest city. Auckland is big, bold and breathtaking and is home to almost a third of New Zealand's total population. Across the bridge and into downtown Auckland, with its high-rise buildings showing the commercial strength of the city. Auckland is a colourful, busy city. It is not only home to some of the country's largest commercial interests, but also some of New Zealand's best theatres, art galleries and restaurants. Auckland is known as the City of Sails, and it's easy to see why. The city's warm climate makes it a water-sporting paradise with boats and seacraft of all kinds exploring the islands of the Hauraki Gulf. Inland, you'll find One Tree Hill, the site of an ancient Maori fortress and a monument to the Maori people of New Zealand.
Auckland's War Memorial Museum is home to many of New Zealand's national historic treasures. On to the New Zealand Pavilion. Having made a major impact at the 1989 International World Expo in Australia, the pavilion was brought home and is now close to Auckland's International Airport. The Hall of Celebration reveals glimpses of New Zealand's heritage and leads on into a real taste of New Zealand, a woolshed. Outside, the entertainment never stops.
Another popular attraction in Auckland is Kelly Tarleton's underwater world, recreating the experience of scuba diving off the coast of New Zealand. It's a magical underwater world where only the fish get wet. You certainly won't find any sharks in here. Waitomo Caves is south of Auckland and is one of New Zealand's most well-known natural wonders.
Defying nature, the stalactites and stalagmites cling to the ceilings and base of the caves. The glowworm grotto is a galaxy of thousands of pale blue lights.
Geologically, New Zealand is very young and active. A fault line running through the centre of the North Island presents itself as a chain of both active and extinct volcanoes. White Island, Mount Edgecombe, Mount Tarawera, Mount Tongariro, Mount Narahoe, Mount Ruapehu and Mount Taranaki all make up a volcanic chain.
Lying off the coast of Bay of Plenty, the active volcano of White Island is an eerie, forbidding sight. 150 meters deep, it continuously emits sulfurous gases and steam that can easily be seen from the mainland 50 kilometers away. In the central North Island, the picturesque mountain Ruapehu is also active. The hot, acidic waters of the crater lake sit atop the mighty mountain. In winter, snow covers Ruapehu, creating two of the most popular ski fields in the North Island. North of Ruapehu, a devastating eruption took place at Mount Tarawera in 1886. The mountain literally blew its top. A chain of 9 deep craters ripped across the mountain, burying many settlements, killing 153 people.
Famous pink and white terraces, often referred to as the 8th wonder of the world, were buried forever. Today, there is little evidence of the destructive elements which caused such devastation. The small Maori village of Te Wairoa has been partially excavated from the mud and ash. The remains of traditional Maori houses, whare, have been unearthed in an effort to reveal the extent of the Mount Tarawera disaster.
Lying at the foot of the mountain is Lake Tarawera, just one of the many lakes which make up the Bay of Plenty district of Rotorua. This region is the ancestral home to many of today's Maori descendants. At its heart is Rotorua City, hub of the North Island's Maori culture, geothermal activity, and tourism. Rotorua is a magnet for both New Zealand and overseas visitors. They come to enjoy the exciting range of attractions and entertainment the city offers.
In the center of the lake is Mokuia Island. Maori legend tells us the island was a sanctuary to Hinamua and Tutanekai, lovers from opposing tribes. A natural hot pool on the island is called Hinamua's Pool. Rotorua boasts some fine examples of Tudor-style architecture, St Faith's Church, and the bathhouse in Government Gardens. Rotorua City is home to 60,000 people. The area has a strong Maori base, which is evident in the culture of the city. The hangi is the traditional Maori feast. The food is placed in baskets and cooked in the ground with white-hot rocks for 3 to 4 hours, producing delicious, succulent food.
Maori carvings are an important part of the culture as seen at the Maori Arts and Crafts Institute. Adorning marae buildings, they're carefully and intricately carved, each telling its own story. New Zealand greenstone, or jade, is very rare and precious to the Maori people. When it's carved, it's done so with great care and respect for the stone.
At Whakarewarewa Thermal Reserve, not much has changed since this country's first beginnings. Storming vents continually explode boiling hot geothermal steam and water into the air. Pohutu, New Zealand's highest erupting geyser, often plays to a height of 18 metres, giving a hint of the awesome powers that lie beneath. The thermal activity of the Rotorua region produces sights, sounds, and especially smells unlike that anywhere else in the world. South of Rotorua, at Waitapu Thermal Reserve, the Lady Knox geyser erupts daily.
But relax. Being so close to such potentially explosive natural energy isn't much of a concern, especially as most of these natural attractions have remained unchanged and stable for many years.
In Rotorua, you'll find both hot and crystal clear cold springs.
Wow, look at these.
At Rainbow and Ferry Springs, you'll see thousands of rainbow and brown trout. The springs are a very popular attraction, nestled in their indigenous setting of native bush.
And this one here is known as the Rainbow Pool. Now, the reasons for us calling it the Rainbow Pool is all this simply contains here a rainbow trout. Now, we have somewhere between 800 to 1,000. None of them have been any means of weighing.
You'll also find native birds, including paradise ducks, pied stilts, native wood pigeons or kororu, and the tui. But the star of the springs must certainly be New Zealand's own kiwi.
The female's got a longer, more curved beak than the male, and it's quite a bit larger in body size and is heavier. They lay one of the largest eggs for any bird in the world. It's about a quarter of the bird's body weight.
Rotorua's Aquadome is well known around the world for its entertaining look at New Zealand's most popular inhabitants, the sheep. There are so many more of them than us.
This is the first meat sheep we're showing you. The black points, the black legs. He's a real mixture, aren't you? He says, don't call me a mongrel. He's a pure breed, the South Dorset down.
The New Zealand wool industry provides over 45% of the world's total demand for coarse wool. Pretty impressive stuff.
We'll see if he can get the button. Just come up onto the stage and I'll show you. Just back in there. See that? Stand, Jay. Sit. Stand. Sit. Speak. Speak. She's probably saying, make up your mind, boss. Where's our sheepdog?
Visitors have a lot of fun getting to know the sheep and the dogs. Just outside, the sheepdog trial display doesn't always go according to plan.
Wellington is the country's capital and seat of government. Parliament buildings and the Beehive stand side by side. Both are striking landmarks. The New Zealand Parliament system is based on the English parliamentary system.
Many travellers leave Wellington for the South Island on an inter-island ferry. Travelling across Cook Strait, the journey takes about 3 hours through some magnificent scenery. Travelling south down the east coast, you'll come to Kaikoura, and a total change of landscape. The snow-capped ranges look down on the rugged Kaikoura coast, its fur seal colonies, and the sperm whales and other sea species which regularly visit this stretch of coastline.
Further south is Christchurch, the main city in the South Island. Christchurch is almost more English than the English. Its beautiful parks, gardens and architecture echo its strong English links. At the heart of Christchurch is Cathedral Square. It has become an open stage for anyone with a soapbox, but boasts such performers as the Wizard and even a town crier.
The River Avon winds its way through Christchurch, passing close to some of the city's most well-known buildings. Even the schools of Christchurch could step straight out of an old English novel.
Christchurch is a wonderful city to stay in and enjoy, and an ideal base from which to explore the rest of the South Island. Like Dunedin, south of Christchurch and steeped in Scottish heritage. Robbie Burns would have been proud, especially with Dunedin's strong academic base. Dunedin's University of Otago was the first of its kind in New Zealand. Today, students still travel from all parts of New Zealand to gain their degrees there. On the outskirts of Dunedin is Larnock's Castle, an extravagant folly in true Scottish style. The castle was built in 1886 with no expense spared.
Larnock built a 3,000 square foot ballroom for his daughter as a 21st birthday present. Tragically, she died of typhoid just after its completion. No farewell to Dunedin would be complete without a pipe band.
Travelling by road from the east coast to the west, you'll drive through native forests over the mountain passes. The Haast Pass links central Otago and Southland to the west coast. The west coast has a charm and atmosphere all of its own. In the early days, gold mining brought the people flocking to the west coast.
At Shantytown, just south of Greymouth, you can still pan for gold just the way those early pioneers did.
What we do is give the pan a good shake with plenty of water. Sideways, don't go into.
In fact, you're even guaranteed a small gold strike of your own. A major gold strike in 1864 saw thousands arrive on the west coast looking for that lucky strike. The rush lasted 3 years, leaving the area scattered with mining relics which are now preserved. Like Shantytown, the way it all was way back then. thank goodness, some things have changed. Further up the coast from Shantytown are the Pancake Rocks, created from stratified limestone formations and looking just like a stack of pancakes.
The Southern Alps form a mountainous backbone along most of the length of the South Island. Mount Cook, Aorangi, towers at 3,764 metres. The Franz Josef and Fox glaciers are a magnificent sight, forming a river of ice which is fed from the Alps. Even now, those glaciers are moving towards the west coast, be it ever so slowly. At the eastern foot of Mount Cook is Lake Pukaki. The lake's turquoise colour is caused by rock flour, finely ground particles of rock held in suspension and carried to the lake.
Lake Tekapo is another peaceful setting and home to the Church of the Good Shepherd. Here, with such a reflective setting and sense of peace, tranquility is found. Lakes Pukaki, Tekapo, Ohau all contribute to hydroelectric power generation, ultimately supplying much-needed energy to the north. There are many lakes in the South Island, but Lakes Hawea and Wanaka would have to be two of the most picturesque. Lake Wanaka attracts thousands of visitors in both winter and summer. The colonial days are alive and well in nearby Arrowtown. The main street boasts authentic colonial shop fronts, giving visitors a taste of early life in New Zealand and the way it used to look. Nearby Lake Hayes carries on the picturesque quality of the region.
Queenstown is one of the country's most popular destinations. Nestled at the foot of the Remarkables, it has become an internationally acclaimed alpine resort. The views are magnificent. And so is the shopping. The TSS Earnslaw is a coal-fired steamer and is known as the Lady of the Lake. It is the last of a long line of steamers which once ruled the waters here. The steamer was originally built to transport people, provisions and animals to the local sheep stations around the shores of Lake Wakatipu. Many vantage points around Queenstown can give you views reminiscent of the Swiss Alps. To get the ultimate view, try the gondola, a great way to appreciate the real majesty of the mountain scenery.
You can take it slowly, fast, or at breakneck speed at Queenstown. Jet boating Kiwi style, guaranteed to get your pulse rate up. Or try a real challenge with whitewater rafting. The rivers and canyons around Queenstown offer it all.
But if you're after a challenge to beat them all, try a spot of bungee jumping. An adrenaline-pumping dive of 150 feet. The operators go to great lengths to make sure it's safe, but it helps if you're just a little bit crazy.
4, 3, 2, 1. It's more easy than I thought it was. Just for a split second, exhilarating. Try it. Recommend it. Yes. Yeah.
The ski fields around Queenstown are some of the best in the Southern Hemisphere and attract thousands each ski season. They're a favourite of both New Zealanders and internationals, with facilities for all grades of skiing.
The valleys and hill country around Lake Wakatipu contain large sheep stations. Each year, New Zealand exports more than 370,000 tonnes of wool to over 50 countries. 3 million New Zealanders share the country with tens of millions of sheep. It's just as well we like them so much.
The peaceful southern lakes of Manapuri and Te Anau have their own special qualities. The road to famous Milford Sound is dwarfed by mountains. For many years, the Sounds lay isolated until the Homer Tunnel, taking 10 years to complete, made it through to the Clydau Valley. The mischievous Kias give an appealing welcome to visitors at the entrance to the tunnel.
The grandeur of Fiordlands National Park unfolds itself in Milford Sound. The waters are as deep as the mountains are high. Encircled by mountains, Lake Quill is a natural reservoir, cascading 700 meters to the valley floor over Sutherland Falls. Mitre Peak, however, is the most famous landmark in Milford Sound.
This is New Zealand. A land of contrasts. A land of unique beauty. And a land full of people waiting to welcome you to their country, Kiwi country.
When greeting a visitor to New Zealand, the Maori will say, "Nau mai, haere mai, welcome to Aotearoa." We offer you the same welcome, to explore with us the heritage of these remarkable people on these islands they discovered so long ago. A whole world of change awaits us as we examine the Maori history, their culture, and their traditions. Hidden by the mists of time since long before man walked on this earth, a remarkable land of unparalleled beauty waited patiently for life in the rich waters of the southern Pacific Ocean. It was here the Maori arrived from Polynesia during the Great Migration, perhaps 1,000 years ago. Its violent birth and growing pains had twisted its spine into mountain ranges and peaks that reached high into the skies, and craters, incredible valleys and vast fjords scarred its surface and chopped away at its outline from one end to the other. But as the unending centuries passed, those jagged outlines were clothed and softened with forests of unbelievable beauty and diversity. Though part of the world of Polynesia, it was probably the last habitable land to be discovered there. And those Polynesians who first saw it already knew of some vast islands in the south, provided by one of their earliest ancestors, a demigod called Maori, who had provided most of the things in their world that made it pleasant and habitable. According to legend, this demigod, Maui, roamed the seas searching for places for his people. At times he cast a line for fish with a hook fashioned from part of the jawbone of his grandmother. And the greatest of all the fish he caught was the North Island of New Zealand, still referred to by the Maori as Te Ika a Maui, the fish of Maui. But thousands more years were to pass before the deep blue waters of the South Pacific around New Zealand were parted by the bows of a number of great canoes. They had come from the north, from Rarotonga in the Cook Group, or Tahiti, or Aiatea in the Society Islands, following, traditions say, directions to the fish of Maui handed down by the great Polynesian explorer, Kupe. They were remarkable mariners, these Polynesians, with light brown skins, tall, athletic, and with straight or wavy hair. They came as colonists to these southernmost and largest of all South Pacific islands, the islands called New Zealand by Abel Tasman, a Dutchman and our first European visitor, but still known to the Polynesians as Aotearoa, land of the long, bright cloud. As with many points on our coastline, monuments like this mark the sites of the arrival of canoes said to have arrived in the Great Fleet of the mid-14th century, bringing the first of our Polynesian explorers from Hawaii much further north in the Pacific. Their arrival here was the final step in a history of 6,000 or 7,000 years of migrations from Southeast Asia, in a series of remarkable voyages which saw them touch every spot of land, however remote, throughout the entire South Pacific, and provide a colony for every habitable island and atoll. It earned them also the title of Vikings of the Sunrise, and an imperishable place in the world of remarkable accomplishments. By the time Europeans arrived in this part of the world, the Polynesians had already occupied an enormous slice of the Pacific, a giant triangle stretching from Hawaii in the north to New Zealand in the south and Rapa Nui, Easter Island, in the east. And what a remarkable land they found here. These islands of New Zealand are not only the largest in the South Pacific, but also the oldest, with a geological history covering millions of years, and a degree of tranquility that had allowed its flora and fauna to develop without interruption. The land was free of predators and mammals, which led to a profusion of birds ranging from the tiny rifleman to the giant moa that sometimes stood 3 meters tall. This display gives some indication of the enormous size of the flightless bird, the moa, which once inhabited and roamed freely throughout New Zealand. Fossils indicate that it was here as long ago as 15 million years. But by the time that man was in his full flight in the middle of the 19th century, the bird had become extinct. Although the giant, the Dinornis, was the one that attracted most attention, there were in fact something like 25 different species of the moa, varying from the giant down to others little larger than a kiwi. Because of this original security, many of the birds had, over the centuries, become ground foragers and had lost the art of flight. But this world of tranquility was turned upside down when these first brown strangers arrived, accompanied by both rats and dogs, the first group of major mammals these islands had known. The first canoes seem to have reached our shores during summer, as traditions speak with delight at seeing the crimson pohutukawa in full bloom. There was certainly plenty for the Maori to be delighted about when he arrived in an area like this from Polynesia. Miles of unspoiled beaches and seas that were liberally stocked with shellfish and ordinary fish in plentiful supplies. Centuries-old middens, the refuse from ancient campsites, still abound and testify to mighty appetites and the abundant supplies once found here. However, though the inland forests were vast, they produced none of the perpetual supplies the immigrants had known in their former homelands. There were no pawpaw, breadfruit, coconut, banana or sugar cane, and if plants or seeds of these came in those first canoes, they failed to survive. Root crops such as taro and yam, staple foods further north, were also missing, and their propagation here from stock brought to these shores was fraught with problems hardly justifying the effort. Only the kumara, the sweet potato, originally from the South American Andes, withstood the subtropic temperatures and could, with care and luck, be cultivated. This was certainly not an easy matter, but the Maori soon learned to recognize the best locations and soil types, both to grow and protect his produce. His living areas, known as pa, took full advantage of these features. Although this is unusually large, most of these ancient pa sites have dimpled across their surface great pits, which in the case similar to this were used for the storage of crops. And the reason the Maori people developed such a marvelous system of protection for their crops was that in New Zealand, for the first time in centuries, they had had to develop the art of agriculture and the preservation of their foodstuffs. These pits were excavated in dry areas on the surface of the pa sites. They were dug substantially into the ground and the excavated soil heaped on the sides to provide a fairly thick wall which gave insulation for the foodstuffs that were protected inside. And a roof would be pitched from wall to wall and supported by posts sunk fairly deeply into the center of the same pits. Life on the coast must have had a great deal to recommend it. But the first Polynesian arrivals in this country were inveterate explorers and yearned to know what lay beyond the bush going along the coastline. After 3 or 4 generations, the first great move was made inland. And this site, Te Hoia Taunga, was one of 3 considerably sized complexes built inland when the first explorers moved away from the coastline. Legends speak of many early adventurers who pushed their way inland and discovered the lakes, the mountains, forests, rivers, springs, and the amazing thermal areas. The population of the Maori, obviously small to begin with, expanded as one generation succeeded another. There might well also have been further migrant arrivals from tropical Polynesia. Pressure on the coastal lands ultimately meant that the more desirable inland areas gradually received their quota of settlers, and within a century or 2, permanent and quite large settlements appeared far inland. As these and their populations expanded, a degree of rivalry over the more favored locations erupted, bringing warfare in its train. To this end, the Maori evolved a system of fortifications, the ruins of which remain today as examples of ingenuity, amazing engineering, and prodigious labor. Hilltops everywhere still show, if you look carefully, the remains of the ancient fortifications. Behind me is an ancient pass site that was, in the 1860s, adapted to take a European fort. Only the great timber palisading that once formed a protective outer barrier has disappeared with time. Even though the forest has grown appreciably in the probably 200 years since this pa called Awhiorangi was abandoned, it is not difficult to tell of the prodigious amount of labor that was required when these trenches were put in to defend this place from enemies. The construction of more permanent houses and other buildings within these sites and settlements, and the desire to adorn the more important of them, led inevitably to an upsurge in the art of carving, which is recognized now as perhaps the ultimate indigenous art form of this country, exhibiting a degree of artistry and skill unmatched in the world of Polynesia. It is in many respects the written record of a people who, until the early 19th century, had never been introduced to the art of writing. The distinctive differences in Maori carvings owe much of this to the isolation of the Maori from the rest of Polynesia over a period of centuries, allowing a unique development. There was, too, an abundance of mighty timber such as the tōtara and kauri, providing a perfect medium for the art. There was also an ample supply of greenstone or jade, allowing a variety of chisels that proved vastly superior to those of inferior materials common to most other Pacific islands. Carving in New Zealand, even in pre-European times when most of the work was done with stone chisels, was regarded as an art form that was unique in Polynesia. But it was undoubtedly the introduction of the steel chisel in the late 18th and early 19th century that gave the impetus to carving that has brought it to the peak of perfection we know today. With the newfound equipment, richly carved houses and a multitude of other pieces became relatively common. Yet despite the techniques and materials available now as we approach the 21st century, much of the carver's art still reflects the loved and ancient legends. Among those most qualified to judge, there are some who believe that foremost in the world of Maori artistry was the superb development of their marine technology. With a maritime background second to none, the vast Pacific Ocean beating against their shores, and vast inland waterways, it is obvious that water transport was an important part of the Maori life. Not simply as a means of transport, but in the case of vessels like this, a wakatawa or war canoe, as an essential item in their perilous life. Some of these, which were perhaps 30 meters in length and capable of carrying 100 paddlers, possessed an element of spirituality, of mana and prestige to those who owned or sailed in them. No better boat-building skills ever existed, and the flawless jointing of giant timbers placed these clearly among the most graceful of all vessels. As with the finest of their houses, the Maori lavished the full extent of the carver's art on these magnificent masters of the waves. Almost every visible area was adorned with ancient and new patterns cut into the exposed timber. Of all the decoration, however, it was perhaps the delicately exquisite yet powerful bow and stern pieces, the tauihu and taurapa, that exhibited those other essential elements of strength and utility. In design, their superb lines seem to reflect a grace that obviously welcomed a union with the waves. Rising high at the stern of one of the war canoes is this magnificent piece, which is referred to as a taurapa. It is easy to see the skill that has gone into this particular carving. Its delicate spirals seem to be so fragile, and yet they are reinforced and strengthened by these beautiful ribs which come down to the base. Nowhere in Polynesia have carvings of these dimensions and these artistic skills exhibited better than on the Wakatawa or war canoe. Some of these vessels remain in our museums. We are fortunate that a revival of interest has seen a new generation of these waka, the canoe of the Maori, emerge on our oceans, lakes, and rivers. In earlier times, it was often the custom that the possessions of a man when he died, or a woman for that matter, would be interred with the deceased. In the case of a particularly important man or chief who may have owned a canoe, then very often the canoe itself would be cut into two pieces, one end inserted into the ground like this and used as a memorial to that chief for as long as the canoe piece would last. As with all peoples, there is a perceived need for decoration, and the Maori was a master of this. The people themselves, at least those of rank, evolved a remarkable extension to the art of carving, using their face and body as the medium. It was what we call tattoo, but the term hardly does justice to this art form. To the Maori, it was moko, a craft that was virtually a carving in the flesh. It is difficult to imagine the agony that must have been endured by those subjected to the artist's tiny scalpel-sharp chisels as they were tapped into the flesh with a mallet, cutting an infinite variety of patterns over the entire face of the men, and sometimes over their shoulders, buttocks, and occasionally even down to the knee. Moko for women, while just as important, was usually confined to the lips and chin. As the chisels cut into the flesh, a pigment was applied, prepared from the collected soot of burnt kauri gum or the resinous heartwood of the kahikatea tree. The blue-black resulting tracery, following the furrows left in the flesh when healed, was as sharp and clear in old age as when it was first applied. The art of moko was discouraged by the earliest missionaries, and by the mid-19th century the practice for men had virtually ceased. But for women, the decoration of lips and chin continued for some well into the first half of this, the 20th century. And there was another development by the Maori here in New Zealand that is believed by many to epitomize the ultimate skill of a handcraft brought about by necessity, reaching a state of superb beauty. Throughout Polynesia, clothing and many other items were manufactured from the bark of the paper mulberry tree and also the palm of the pandanus. But those plants did not flourish in New Zealand, and the Maori had to find something to take its place. And he very quickly found that the native flax, Phormium tenax, provided all of the necessary items for clothing and many other uses. It was without question the most important non-food plant in this country. The principle of plaiting obviously came to New Zealand with the Maori, for throughout Polynesia certain techniques and designs were widespread. Baskets and mats could still be produced in their age-old way, but a major change came with the production of garments, something needed to cope with the colder climate. The Maori devised a method of producing a thread from the fibrous content of the flax leaf, which was then used to manufacture cloaks and the like. A superlative system of downward weaving was evolved. The extraction of the fiber, its transformation into a continuous thread, the setting up and ultimate production of a textile represented sometimes many months of tedious work. Although carving seems to be regarded as the ultimate art form amongst the Maori of New Zealand, there is little doubt that weaving was equally remarkable. When you consider that This beautiful garment has been woven entirely from the thread of the native flax. One can appreciate the skill and the long hours that went into the production of such a beautiful garment. When enhanced and decorated with the feathers of the kiwi and other native birds, these garments achieved a beauty rarely matched. Nowhere in Polynesia did the production of such garments reach the heights they did in New Zealand. Not only did they provide the utility and protection so necessary in the harsher climate of this country, but the artistic merit was unsurpassed. When the quality and the beauty of these garments is taken into consideration, it is easy to understand why they have always been amongst the most prized items of the Maori people. And even today, on important occasions, the most prized gift that can be offered to a visitor is one of these beautiful cloaks. Kia ora. These occasions also gave the Maori the opportunity to display other personal treasures, many handed down through successive generations. Ornaments of greenstone or bone in a variety of forms evolved over the centuries, and weapons, many bearing individual names and each, in a way, possessing its own spiritual individuality. Though varying in size and shape, these hand weapons were all clubs in one form or another, and many of these hardwood, whalebone or greenstone pieces have been wielded with destructive force against enemies of the ancestors of those holding them today. Tradition demands that visitors of consequence, or groups from afar, are challenged on arrival at a marae or village gathering place. This is, in essence, to determine whether the visit is a friendly one or otherwise. A token is offered to the visitor. If it is accepted, they come in peace. Speeches are exchanged, the speakers validating their position in society and explaining their relationship to those assembled, with sometimes monumental genealogies extending back into the mists of time. Even today, these formal Maori functions are conducted in New Zealand's own indigenous language. However, all is not formality at a Maori gathering. There are songs and dances that generally portray a past way of life and incidents of note drawn from legend and tradition. The young people, as all young people do, used these gatherings to cement friendships, to pursue the course of love, or to join in games that were favourites throughout the land. Their games were little different from what they are anywhere in the world. They are to provide amusement, pleasure, and a degree of competition. There was kite flying, walking on stilts, the skill of whipping a spinning top, tobogganing on a hillside, knucklebones and cat's cradle, and other amusements. The girls were encouraged to participate with song and dance and to master the use of the poi, a raupo or bulrush ball attached to either a long or short string. These actions and skills were held to endow them with a special grace of movement, much admired. Games encouraged for the boys, on the other hand, were generally much more athletic and required particular dexterity. The haka, a posture dance in particular, was designed to fire the enthusiasm as well as discouraging belligerence in a possible aggressor. They were undoubtedly looked upon as initial military exercises to provide for the agility and precision that would be so vital during adulthood. But of all things at a gathering like this, it is the superb wharerunanga, the meeting house that holds pride of place not only for this tribe, but for all tribes and sub-tribes throughout New Zealand. It is in fact referred by them to be their poho, the very seat of affection of their people. But it's more than that. It represents in fact the body of the ancestor after whom most of these houses are named. Inside the wharerunanga, or meeting house, lavish use was made of the artists of each tribe and sub-tribe. The carvers were here to provide the magnificent popo, these carved panels, which in turn supported the rafters, likened to the ribs of a man, which in turn supported the main ridgepole or spine. And between the great popo, the women prepared these beautiful panels of tukutuku, which were in fact panels that held the insulation, the raupo or bulrush, behind the walls. And the decorations were done from pingao, from kia, forest products used to make these beautiful designs. Although these little houses hardly rate as superior dwellings, they were perfectly adequate for the time. Generally in use where they were cultivating and that sort of thing, they were more than adequate for a family and shelter for the night. And moreover, they were built with absolute protection. The walls were lined closely with the raupo or bulrush, which gave them marvelous insulation. And built of the trunks of the kaponga or mamaku, they lasted almost indefinitely and merely had to be repaired when they were required again. Surely one of the finest of all Maori buildings, and certainly one of the most ornate, was this, the pātaka, or storehouse, where, in the case of a particularly fine example like this, many of the treasures belonging to a particular sub-tribe would have been stored. In the case of less ornate storehouses, they would have been used probably for food. Hence they are well up from the ground to prevent any depredations by rats or other rodents. And the provision of food, particularly in generous quantities to visitors, has always been an obligation to Maori hosts. In common with most Pacific peoples, food was, in most parts of New Zealand, prepared in earth ovens, where heated rocks sprinkled with water produced sufficient steam to cook to perfection and provide a unique flavour found with no other method. Those living in the thermal areas, which run like a scar across New Zealand's North Island, were fortunate, and still are, because nature here provides an abundance of steam or boiling water where food can be prepared to perfection, on demand, 24 hours a day. Here the whole process is a much simpler matter. Even today, this cooking system, known as the hangi, is utilised to the full and particularly appreciated by visitors to our country. The New Zealand Maori population numbered perhaps 200,000 when European colonisation began making a distinct impact during the early 19th century. The trickle of European arrivals soon became a flood, and there was no way it could be stemmed. The largely inflexible and often inexplicable English system of law at that time, along with the rapid alienation of vast areas of ancestral land, drove many of the original inhabitants to a point of desperation and inevitably to conflict. Twice there was open warfare, once in the far north during the 1840s, when the warrior Honeheke cut down the British flagstaff to show his rejection of their authority. Then again during the 1860s and early 1870s, there was a renewal of hostilities, and during this long, miserable period in our history, confusion, mistrust, and misunderstandings eventually found the Maori precipitated not only into battles with the European armies, but also against troops of their own people. As if these things were not enough, the country was rocked in June 1886 by the eruption of Mount Tarawera, leaving a vast chasm across the countryside which still, in many places, seethes and hisses as a reminder of the forces still only held in check by the thin layer of earth beneath our feet. In that one blinding night, the surrounding lands were plastered and buried deep beneath a layer of ash and scalding mud, wiping out the surrounding villages and their inhabitants, burying them forever under a now unrecognizable landscape. Some were a little luckier, and despite the destruction of their land and most of their possessions, they survived. Stark reminders of that fateful night remain at Te Wairoa, the buried village. Today, the mountain displays a peaceful and picturesque backdrop to the beautiful Lake Tarawera. Before the 20th century arrived, the Maori population, ravaged by war, disease, and despondency, had plunged to less than 40,000. Those watching believed that the New Zealand Maori would soon be as extinct as the Moa. And even those with sympathy for these people and their plight felt that the only thing to do was to smooth the pillows for their long and final sleep. But they were wrong, and the 20th century has seen a remarkable revival. Intermarriage with white arrivals began to swell their numbers, and today a largely younger population has almost reached 300,000. The Maori of today maintains a powerful link with the past, but almost a century and a half have been needed to restore these people to a level of real security, to the position rightfully theirs, where they are able now to involve all New Zealanders in a unique cultural identity found nowhere else. Importantly too, a skillful use of their remaining resources has put them squarely into the worlds of business, education and economics, with the obvious promise of a full share in all that technology will provide in the 21st century. But sharing is not limited to technology, and the road to equality for the Maori has not been an easy one. There is hope now, however, and in all levels of government service and in the halls of power, Parliament itself, the Maori is making a significant contribution towards that ultimate goal. Education for both Maori and non-Maori provides opportunity for all ages to learn Maori language and culture. And indeed, such studies are now an established part of school curriculum. As part of the revival of the Maori language, kohanga reo, language nests, give our little ones the chance to absorb and appreciate the tongue of the Maori. The whole history of New Zealand's Polynesians, the Maori, has been one of challenge. But there is a new air of optimism for the survival. In fact, not only for the survival, but for the promotion and the acceptance of their rich culture as a national heritage. We are fortunate too for the strength that must ultimately come from an amalgam of the rich and diverse cultures on these beautiful islands.
If you could imagine a land with subtropical beaches, native forest, beautiful scenery, contrasted with untouched mountain peaks and rugged fjords, then you would be here, a land full of adventure and scenic wonders. New Zealand.
New Zealand is located within the South Pacific Ocean, just over 1,600 kilometres southeast of Australia. Comprised of 2 main islands with a population of just over 3 million, the range of activities and opportunities for adventure are everywhere. Cape Reinga is the northernmost tip of the North Island. The Cape is also where the Tasman Sea merges with the Pacific Ocean. And it's here that our New Zealand adventure begins.
The desert-like sand dunes of 90 Mile Beach provide a source of fun for both young and old. There are various ways to see this picturesque region of New Zealand coastline. For the more adventurous, 4-wheel drive motorbikes provide a fun way to feel the sea air and traverse some spectacular sand formations. Guided tours by 4-wheel drive give the opportunity to meet the locals and obtain interesting information about the Far North District.
Depending on the tide, daily coach tours either travel north or south down 90 Mile Beach. In fact, 90 Mile Beach is an official Northland alternative route to New Zealand's main central highway, State Highway 1. Seafood is abundant throughout the coastline. Just dig a hole with your foot, and before you know it, you've uncovered pipis, the local shellfish delicacy. Paihia, Waitangi and Russell are all towns from which to explore the beautiful Bay of Islands. Popular with visitors, the Cape Brett cruise departs regularly from Paihia. Cruising on this well-equipped catamaran makes for a very pleasant day out on the sea. The Hole in the Rock cruise takes you through rich game fishing waters to Piercy Island, best known as the Hole in the Rock Island. The highlight of this tour is to find out if the vessel can actually fit through this natural formation. It's easy to get the feeling that the captain may have performed this feat once or twice before, yet it's still a tremendous highlight of the cruise. The tropical appeal of the Bay of Islands lends itself to the popular activity of chartering your own yacht. With a little skill, discovering your very own private island bay gives a sense of a real exotic vacation, well away from the hustle and bustle of city life.
The warm, crystal clear waters of these islands just seems to beckon you to dive in. It's a good feeling to know that New Zealand is so unspoilt. Little changed from that which confronted the early settlers so many years ago. The Bay of Islands could be termed the cradle of New Zealand history, with its sheltered waters attracting many visits from colonial ships, which helped establish the country's first capital at Russell. With thousands of streams and rivers feeding the many New Zealand lakes, the occasional waterfall can sometimes offer an opportunity for adventure, such as here at Rainbow Falls.
Easing your way down can be a little demanding, but with the help of assisting professionals, waterfall abseiling is one challenge that you'll find hard to forget.
Auckland is New Zealand's largest city. With just over 1 million people, this city has become the heart of New Zealand commerce and industry.
Being a coastal city, Auckland is often referred to as the city of sails. And it's also well known for its old architecture and monuments.
The Coromandel Peninsula is well known for its many beaches and native forest bushwalks. This beautiful, lush region of New Zealand is very popular with both locals and internationals alike. And from the air, the Coromandel opens up to a wealth of natural beauty and appeal. With so many beaches and coastal formations, the Coromandel is truly an adventure playground that's well worth exploring. The clarity of this stretch of water attracts marine life in abundance and also gives ample opportunity to explore the many diving holes that are popular around the coast. Swimming, boating, fishing and water skiing are all popular activities around the Coromandel.
An adventure trip on board the Hahe Explorer is a great way to get to know the coastline. These motorized inflatables are ideal for the various conditions you can encounter. Gliding gently over forming waves and rising swells can give passengers a ride similar sometimes to that of a roller coaster. However, there's ample opportunity to get excellent views of the numerous cliff formations and deserted subtropical Coromandel beaches. Sea caves can easily be explored, some of which form blowholes when the occasional storm blows in.
For those with more time, a relaxing day can also be enjoyed on board your own sea kayak. This tour leaves from Whitianga, taking you past Cook's Beach, named after New Zealand's early discoverer, Captain James Cook. An overnight sea kayaking adventure can eventually take you to Hot Water Beach, just south of Hahei. Easily accessible by either vehicle or boat, it takes just a few minutes to dig a hole and relax in your own thermally heated saltwater pool. Waitomo Caves also offer excitement with black water rafting. This part of the adventure is always humorous, with the operators guaranteeing that they have the right-sized inner tube just for you. Although the sport of navigating along subterranean rivers and inner tubes is relatively new to New Zealand, the operators here are highly trained professionals. Carefully traversing down, you arrive at the Blackwater Cavern. Jump in and you're on a wild guided blackwater raft adventure of a lifetime.
If blackwater rafting isn't enough, then Waitomo offers even more challenge, descending into the untouched splendor of the lost world. No prior abseiling experience is necessary, as instructors are on hand along with all equipment. With experts advising and following you down, the 300-foot journey into the lost world is very safe and very awe-inspiring. This vertical cave was formed over 2 million years ago as a result of violent earth upheavals. Today, the cave is stable, being a rich natural environment for the growth of native ferns and mosses.
Very scary up there. I can't do it.
There's a real sense of achievement when you reach the cave floor, especially when you look back from where you came. In this brisk, clean environment, the walk out along the cave floor resembles an adventure into the unknown. The terrain and surroundings are so unfamiliar, a real lost world. And yet you're assured that the way out is just ahead.
Many of the famous geothermal wonders of New Zealand can be found within the central North Island district of Rotorua. Welling up from the thin crust, boiling mud and volcanic pools can be seen in various thermal reserves, such as here at Waiotapu or Waimangu.
Steaming cliffs, vents and boiling water rivers are awe-inspiring and reflect in geological terms the young age of the country's formation. The special native scenery of this region also offers adventure. With many native bush walks and rivers to follow, the Rotorua region is an outdoor adventure playground that's both challenging and refreshing.
Rivers give ample opportunity for whitewater rafting. But here at the headwaters of the Kaituna, rafting tends to take on a different meaning.
And back pedal. And back pedal. Okay, hold on, get down.
It's on this river that one of the world's highest commercially rafted waterfalls presents an adrenaline-pumping challenge that's hard to beat. 21 feet of vertical white water. Jet boating was pioneered in New Zealand. Just north of Rotorua, the Long Ridge jet takes passengers on a high-speed journey along the lower reaches of the Kaituna River. Fast action and incredible spins are all part of the special attributes that have made these jet boats internationally famous.
With over 20 freshwater lakes within the Rotorua area, exploring them by kayak can be very relaxing. For example, Lake Tikitapu, sometimes referred to as the Blue Lake, is surrounded by high ranges, allowing the tranquility of this picturesque lake to be unmoved by normal winds. New Zealand is a mountain bike paradise. Many native and exotic forests give ample opportunity for a biking adventure. It's a great way to get fit. Plus, it's a good way to admire the great outdoors that this wonderful country has to offer. Mount Tarawera has major significance within New Zealand's recent history.
Mount Tarawera is one of the region's highest mountains. Many of Rotorua's 20 or so lakes can be seen from the peak, a very breathtaking view. The scoria formations and craters can even be safely ventured into by foot, and without too much effort, sliding, walking, or even running down 700 feet of scoria into the old crater is possible. Centrally located in the North Island is Lake Taupo. This is New Zealand's largest lake. To the west, Mount Ruapehu provides a scenic backdrop to the lake. Lake Taupo is renowned for its trout fishing. With many fishing guides operating from the Taupo township, it's very easy to enjoy a day or two of great fishing, with catches in excess of 10 pounds being very typical.
Gee, I wished I'd have caught it.
Yeah, so do I.
A scenic day adventure on board one of the various lake cruises is very relaxing. Some tours can take you to beautiful lagoons or across the lake to see the carefully sculptured cliff carvings, recently created by a group of modern-day stone carvers. The the popularity of jet boat rides is also evident on Lake Taupo. Puka Falls is the main outlet of the lake and forms the breathtaking headwaters of the Waikato River. On board this genuine restored riverboat, passengers can get a spectacular close-up look at the falls. The Taupo region is also the location of New Zealand's largest geothermal power station. At Wairaki, naturally occurring thermal vents are combined to create high-pressure steam that's used to generate electricity. Within this field, some very odd thermal formations can be explored, some of which are said to resemble the craters of the moon.
The clear skies over Taupo open up to the adventure of tandem skydiving. Free fall at 120 miles per hour. No experience is necessary, as the experienced skydiver that you're strapped to takes full control. Before the jump, full instructions and descriptions of what is about to happen is given.
Your knees up in front of you and just the tape on them. That's it, and relax. My foot will go out and then you swing both heels out. That's it. And right on the edge there, okay?
The engine bursts into life, and then your 10,000-foot adventure is happening. When the excitement of free fall is broken by the chute, look around as the view is magnificent.
It is the best thing I have ever done. Brilliant. I want to do it again. Well, it's fantastic. Like another one.
Yeah, good feeling. Excellent. I'll do it again tonight. Probably not tomorrow then.
Mount Ruapeo is a predominant landmark in the central North Island. It's the home of New Zealand's largest ski field, Whakapapa. With the season opening in the middle months of the year, thousands of skiers enjoy the many runs and facilities Whakapapa has to offer. Venturing south, the city of Nelson is the first northern city of the South Island. Boasting of having the most sunshine hours in the country, the Nelson region is well known for its gardens, beaches, and vineyards. Just out of Nelson at Takaka, crystal clear spring water wells up from the ground. In one of the surrounding streams, you can have a very different experience of feeding freshwater eels. The locals have been doing this for years. At Shantytown, near Greymouth, panning for gold the way they used to do it can often lead to a real strike of your own. Gold mining has also been part of this coastal region since the early pioneering days of the 1800s. Many of the old mining relics have been restored, giving the visitor the opportunity to become part of the pioneering spirit of long ago.
If you don't experience blackwater rafting in the North Island, then the adventure stream rafting in your own personalised inner tube may be just the answer. The brown colour of these rafting waters are attributed to the high content of naturally occurring minerals within the river.
The lushness of the West Coast native forest can be sourced to its very high annual rainfall. This district has a rugged beauty that can't be found anywhere else in the country. The many walkways within native forests and reserves make for an exhilarating tramping adventure, such as here on the Heafy Track. The remoteness of the West Coast can often lead you to places that are untouched by human foot. They're places of peacefulness, places that inspire. Isolated from the rest of the West Coast, Kalamea basks on a rich coastal plain. Remarkable limestone rock arches and moa-bone caves can be explored, eventually leading to the awesome Kalamea arches in the Oparara Valley at the southern end of the track. Many of the designated walking tracks in New Zealand are maintained by the Department of Conservation. Tramping huts are generally well cared for, with walkways also being well defined. When the weather is good, this region allows the tramper to savor some of the greatest joys the outdoors can offer. However, the erratic climate of the West Coast can sometimes see snow in midsummer. But for the seasoned tramper, the many huts along the track will always provide protection from the elements. The spring-fed rivers and pools just seem to invite you. It's a great way to be refreshed just before setting up camp under one of the many natural formations that are typical in this area. Traversing the many creeks and streams can sometimes be challenging. But when the sun is out and the day is calm, you can easily be drawn into these beautiful surroundings, not having a care in the world.
The West Coast glaciers of Fox and Franz Josef make for an exciting tramping or helicopter adventure.
Franz Josef is New Zealand's best observed and recorded glacier. Although you can venture onto the ice unaccompanied, to make the most of this adventure and to fully savor the extraordinary colors of the ice flow, guided tours are recommended.
Oh, great. Hey, check this out. Beautiful.
Mount Cook is New Zealand's highest peak. At 3,762 meters above sea level, Mount Cook is just one of the many alpine mountains that make up the Southern Alps. With so much untouched snow, the temptation of some serious heli skiing is always there.
Off down this ridge line and cut over onto the far side and ski the skyline ridge over there. Then we'll have to check out that crevasse at the bottom.
The scenery is awe-inspiring and still, with the vast expanse of the Alps beckoning the skier to a white paradise.
At Dunedin, surf rafting is a popular adventure activity. With the use of a small yet highly powered outboard, this activity is a good show of the operator's skill in battling against the elements, especially when you're one of the crew. Dunedin is also the home and nesting place of the giant albatross, as well as the endangered yellow-eyed penguin.
The many southern lakes of the South Island are often surrounded and fed by picturesque alpine mountains. Many half and full-day launch cruises operate on these lakes, such as here on Lake Manapori and Milford Sound, both of which have some of New Zealand's best-loved scenery. the steamship TSS Earnslaw, often referred to as the Lady of the Lake, operates from the Queenstown Wharf at Lake Wakatipu.
Queenstown itself hums with visitors. This is the South Island's primary tourist town, full of adventure and nightlife. The many rivers and canyons around Queenstown give ample opportunity for a large number of outdoor adventure activities, such as drive yourself jet boating, or how about 360-degree spins with the pros? Whitewater rafting through the beautiful Skipper's Canyon will leave you spellbound. And then there's bungee jumping off Skipper's Bridge, 220 feet straight down. The operators here go to a lot of trouble to ensure your safety, but it also pays to be a little bit crazy.
During the winter, Queenstown also comes alive. Halfway between Lake Wanaka and Queenstown is the well-established ski field of Cardrona. Here, an assortment of entertaining activities operate, which cater for young and old. New Zealand is rapidly becoming a major holiday destination within the South Pacific.
With unpolluted waters, clean air and beautiful scenery, it's no wonder why this country is gaining such popularity.
A land full of adventure, a land full of beauty, a land just waiting for your discovery.